Hello again, and welcome to Guitar Week 4. Crazy to think that we're already to week 4, hey? So, let's just do a quick recap. We've learned all 6 strings now. We learned the first and second in week 1, we learned the third and fourth in week 2, and we just learned the fifth and sixth strings last week in our last video. So, since we tend to do a quick review each time, let's start with a review. And then just to give you a heads up as to what we're going to work on this week, we're going to introduce power chords, which we did briefly touch on in one of our previous songs. And then what we're also going to start looking at is maybe a couple scales this week as well. So review, some power chords, learning how to get that good rock sound, and then we're going to start working on some scales to really work that finger movement. And then the hope is that for week 5, we'll actually start to introduce how to play chords. Okay, so that's going to be the game plan. Let's get right into the review. Okay, so as I said, last week we learned about the 5th and 6th strings. So let's get right into it. Okay, we're going to start out on the 5th string. Again, it's our A, so that's the open. Remember, the 0 is our open. We have a B on the 2nd. And a C on the 3rd. Okay, A, B, C. Pretty simple. Okay, on our 6th string now. Okay, we have our open is the E. Our 1st fret is the F. And again, if you remember correctly, this is the exact same as the 1st string. That's our F, and now we're going to use our 3rd finger for the G. And I will try to remind everyone again, do those finger exercises we talked about, right? Exercise 1 and exercise 2. Try and do those at the start before we even start playing this lesson, right? Because they're going to get your fingers warmed up, okay? I usually do a quick stretch and everything before I go as well. A little stretch, a little crack, but a little bit of everything, okay? So that is your 5th and 6th string quick review, right? So now, Spider-Man. We learned it briefly last week, okay? Let's just remind everyone how it goes, okay? So. All right, there we go. Now, if you remember correctly last week, I did play it a little more sped up, because if you're to find the song on YouTube or wherever you get your music, it is sped up, right? But review the last lesson to get that speed on how I played it, okay? The last one we learned last week is Darth Vader theme. And now the other thing we talked about last week as well was I called them positions. So remember, our standard position is 1st position. So that's when our pointer finger is on the 1st fret, and then the next fingers kind of fall in place. If you remember correctly from last week, the Darth Vader theme song is actually played out of 2nd position. The really quick reference as to how to look what position you should put your hands into is if you look at the song, okay? If you look on the screen there, the lowest number, apart from 0 is open, okay? That 0 we can play without a hand anywhere. We could have our hands up here and still play a 0. You want to look at the lowest number that is available, basically. You want to look at the lowest number that is not a 0. So in this case, in Darth Vader, it's a 2, okay? So that means we will never have to play on this 1st fret. So why would I try and stretch my fingers starting with the middle? This is one of my strongest fingers, my pointer finger. So let's put it at the 2nd fret, okay? And then now my fingers are in a much better position. So Darth Vader theme again is. Now if you remember, we had this big jump, okay? So I'm going to use my ring finger, which is already there, and jump to that 6th fret. Okay, if you want tips again on how to play that, review the last lesson. I really broke it down, okay? But that's it. That's that's a sixth, fifth and sixth string. Those are two simple songs to get you going and get you familiar with each string, okay? And introducing to positions. Now, let's get into some of the rock fun stuff here, okay? So we're gonna introduce power chords. Now, basically, a power chord is a smaller version of a full chord, okay? Now, I haven't listed what these chords are, but the basic chord introduction that I'll give you, and again, we're starting with power chords because they're easier to play, but whatever the lowest note, so remember, when I explained a chord before, it's in tablature, it's notes on top of each other. So if we scroll to the next page should be on the screen, page 18, you'll see that there's a 2 and a 0 stacked on top of each other, okay? But they're meant to be played together. So what this means is that the lowest note in this case, right? So the lowest note, I mean actually written. So in this case, it's the 0 because that's on the bottom line, okay? Is an E. We know this because we've learned it, plus it's on the page. So this is actually an E power chord. I believe it's actually called an E7th. But we can get into those details on a different lesson. But basically what we're trying to do here is we want to make sure, and the way we play this that I have it written down is we're going to have our open on the 6th string. We're going to have our second finger on the 5th string. And then you can see the next note on that line is together. If you remember when we did this before, the reason I'm setting it up this way is I want to make sure that you can hear both notes that you're about to play cleanly. Now, power chords are pretty straightforward to make sure you don't mute. You can see that if I have my finger kind of resting awkwardly, I'm muting it. Power chords are pretty easy that we shouldn't mute, okay? So the next two are going to be the 1st fret and the 3rd. Now, for those of you with smaller hands, this is going to be tricky. What I would recommend you do, okay, is try to, if you have to, use both your ring and your pinky to try and push that note down, okay? Just because, like, you can try to kink your wrist, but when you're trying to put 2 fingers down, it doesn't help a ton. It will help some. Don't believe it won't. It will, but really try to turn your wrist, okay? And slap that pinky on there. So that's another power chord. We go up one more. Now, from this position, if you're making sure you can hear both notes, go ahead and slide it. So we can slide up the board, and you can see the next ones are 2 and 4. So, okay. Now, I've only written the 1 and 3 and the 2 and 4 on there once, just to show you that they need to be played separately. If you find you're not able to push hard enough and you hear that, then just keep going back and forth until you get that clean sound. And then you can play them together. Now, when you're strumming on these, okay, there can always be a bad habit where you want to just strum everything, okay? We don't want to do that on a power chord unless it's written all across all strings, unless there's 6 numbers that you see ahead of you, right? In this case, when I strum, you really want to make sure it's just those 2. Now, some people have the habit on a power chord where they'll just kind of walk through it. We got to be aggressive with it. Okay? You can really see that 1st string pushing when I strum. You can really see how it's bending. And then I basically just played the 2 right there. If you hit that 3rd, you can hear there's a little awkward sound to it, okay? It's just going to take practice, but really try to get that. If you're really concerned that you're going to hit that 4th, 5th, 4th, 3rd, 2nd string, strum up. Okay, so you would put it underneath, so on the bottom half of the 5th string and strum up. And then you're only guaranteeing you hit those 2. I wouldn't recommend this, but if you're really just trying to get the sound down initially, try it. But the practice is we need to get those 2, okay? And then the last one there would just be 3, 5. You'll notice as we walk up the fretboard, my fingers actually get smaller and smaller. right? So this is the widest one. So when I have you playing that 1-3, if you can do this one, you can do all the rest of them. If your fingers can fit the 1-3, all the rest of these notes just get easier and easier when you're playing a power chord, okay? So, what better power chord to start off with than Smoke on the Water? Smoke on the Water is arguably one of the most recognized power chord riffs you will ever learn, and it's super simple, okay? So, what I would recommend doing first is to play through the song, playing just the notes on the 6th string first, and using just your pointer finger. Now, I know that goes against what we've talked about when I said play it like this, but if you remember on the power chords, we were sliding, right? We're here, then here, then here, we're sliding, because you should always have that bass finger with your pointer, and then the secondary finger with one of the other ones. I recommend the ring finger, because that still puts us in that position where the 1 fret, 2nd fret, 3rd fret, right? As we move up, just keep them in that position. So pointer finger is on the 6th string, ring finger is on the 5th string, okay? So for Smoke on the Water, I want you to practice sliding, okay? Sliding is that, okay? Practice that. So we're gonna have, okay? Pretty straightforward. Pretty easy in that regard, right? We're playing a few notes. Now, for the 2nd string, or for the 5th string, sorry, I meant the 2nd note. Let's play it through once, playing just the notes on the 5th string. Now, the only difference between these two is that I'm still going to use my middle finger for that 2nd fret, and then I'm going to use my ring finger for the rest. Okay, so it's going to go like this. Pretty straightforward. Now we just put them together. So we're going to have, oh, messed up already. That's on me. Here we go. And that's Smoke on the Water. There's a lot of variations on this song that you can find, but this is the simplest one, and it's the easiest one to learn. Okay? So you can play it back as many times and go through each section a little bit. If you're really struggling with the transition between certain notes, right? Maybe your slide isn't right. Like, play around. But like I said, first time through, just the 6th string. Second time through, just the 5th string. Third time through, play all of it together, and then just keep practicing. Okay? We got 2 more on the power chord charts, and then we'll get to a few of those scales here. Okay? So the next one we're going to play is Wild Thing. For those of you that have ever seen the movie Major League, you'd be very familiar with this song. You know, Ricky Vaughn, Wild Thing, but for the younger people, you might not know that yet. So Wild Thing is going to play like this. And again, let's do it bass note first, okay? And then the auxiliary note second, okay? So it's going to go. This is a very, very condensed version with just like a main part. As I'm reading it now, I maybe should have written it a little different to get the full song, but this will get the point across. Again, we're learning power chords, okay? The secondary note now, okay, is going to be, again, with my ring finger. Okay, and then we combine them together. So it's... Okay? Again, very straightforward. We're using just 2 fingers on 2 notes. Now, the one thing you'll notice with Wild Thing is that we actually do go up to the 5th and 4th strings. So now we really have to watch our strumming to make sure that we're not playing that 6th string, because what will happen, this is what it would sound like, is it doesn't sound good. So really pay attention and really make sure that you're now strumming. So those first 2 are easy, they're on the 6th and 5th. all you have to do is when you're moving, just, you can feel it push against that next string. There's enough of a pause between each note that you can go, get it ready, right? You can see as soon as I play that, so I have 1, 2, and I put it right on top of the 5th string. So then I can go, and I'm just putting it right back there. Okay, I'm constantly keeping it. I know where it is. It's going to take time. I've been playing a long time. Familiarize yourself with it, and then go back down. All right, that's Wild Thing. Last one we're going to learn is a pretty popular song as well here, Highway to Hell. Okay, now I will direct you to a couple things in this song. The first is you'll see there's X's. Okay, X's are, well, I'm going to play it for you. Okay, so it's going to start out with Highway to Hell. So okay, you'll notice I played it, right? I strummed, but there was no real noise. So what this is, I forget the technical term for it, to be honest, right in this moment, but basically it's a muted strum. We'll call it that. We'll call it a muted strum. Okay, so we're trying to get that noise. Okay, so when we play this, it's, now how we play this is we're pushing down for the first 3 strums here, so, and then I just lift off enough that I'm no longer pushing down, but my fingers are still on the string. So if you look, it would be pushing to go lift off, right? So if I strum, you can see I can just go, you can see when I push, and then I just lift off, but my fingers are still touching. And that's the sound it makes, okay? Next one is tricky, because we really have to extend our hand. Now, with this, this is really where you might want to use your pinky, because we have to go on the 5 and the 2, because it's going to go and sound. You see how that goes? See, that's a big stretch. If you got to use your pinky, do it, but push really, really hard, okay? Again, my hands are bigger. I can handle that. For you younger players that are just trying to figure this out, you may have to use your pinky, okay? And really get that stretch, okay? Just like that. And then it does another. Okay? And then we go back to that. This is a tough one because we got to go from the 5 and 2, or the 2-5, all the way up here. Okay? Just pay attention to it. You'll figure it out. And then we'll just do a hold. What did I write down on there? Why did I put an 8? That's an odd one. Maybe we won't worry about that last line when you're playing this, okay? One thing you can go to as well is ultimateguitar.com, okay? That's a site I use. That's where I took a lot of these from. Some of these I wrote off my own knowledge, but if you go to ultimateguitar.com, that is the #1 resource for all tablature, okay? I recommend it to anyone. Once we get through this course, you want to learn any song, go there, okay? Because that's really going to give you, it's going to look exactly how I wrote it out right here, okay? It's going to tell you which notes to play on which strings, and then you just play along and follow. You can go section by section, and if you have, like I said, your music playing in the background as well, try to play along. That's one of the best ways I learned how to play, was trying to play along to songs with the tablature there. So then I know what notes they're playing, but then I can also try and play it to the speed that the song is actually going to. But anyway, so Highway to Hell here, okay, just that first line. Again, full speed is going to sound like this, so. Okay, there you go. And now that would play through back and forth a bunch in the song, but you can figure that out when you hear the song. So, last thing this week we're going to touch base on. We're going to go all the way up to our pentatonic scales, they're called, okay? So, you'll see on the page here, page 8, I believe is what I'm on, you'll see it says second position, fifth position. So this is actually going to be training us out of those positions we talked about and getting more familiar with the fretboard as we move up and up. Because when you get onto those tablature websites and start playing other songs, there's a lot of songs that start happening up here. There's a lot of songs, okay? So we'll just play through the second position one just to give you a feel as to how it should sound. And then that'll probably be it for today's lesson. But I encourage you, when we go away from this, to play through all of them because it'll familiarize you with playing up here. And the first time you're playing, when your hand is right up against the body, it feels weird, and you really have to reach, especially if you ever get like a 15th position, right? Because then you're going to be like, right? You're going to be way up there, and it takes a lot of reach. You can see how much my thumb, that's as far as my thumb can go, is right there. I can't go further, but my fingers can really reach. But it takes time. You really got to take practice. That's all it comes down to. So let's start out with our second position, A minor pentatonic, okay? Again, we're in second position. So my first finger is technically my pinky, okay? So. Okay? Doesn't need to be played any faster than that. Can be obviously played slower than that, okay? All we're focused on is really making sure we're putting our fingers on the right spot, that we're strumming along the way we go, and it actually is in tune. It's a scale kind of thing, right? So we're learning a scale. So if you ever want to write your own song, these are really good bases to go from, because you can use these as bass notes for chords or for doing a sequence, so like a picking sequence, and you can use these as bases. So one more time. All right. And this is a really good trainer as well for your pinky, okay? So that was a minor. So minor, we'll get into the minor and major stuff and when we do chords next week, but this gives you an idea. Okay, so lastly is going to be our second position, C. This is a major pentatonic, okay? So our first note's going to be that 3, okay? So. All right, one more time. We'll do one more time. Ready? Now the easy thing when you're playing these chords is, as long as you're in that second position, all you have to do is put the finger down. If you see a 3, okay, right now the 3, yeah, that's my middle finger. If I see a 2, that's my pointer finger. You don't really need to be watching where you put your fingers. You have to trust your fingers that they are above the right fret. As long as I'm walking down like this, my fingers, as you can see, when I walk them down, they stay, my middle finger wavers a bit, but more or less they're staying in line in the fret that they're in. So practice, practice, practice these scales, and again, you can go through any of the scales that are on here, okay? I think there's a second, a fifth, a seventh, a ninth, and the highest one we have is a 12th, okay? So try all of those out. They'll be very similar patterns, but again, as we get higher up in that 12th, your fingers are actually really close, okay? So give it a whirl. Practice, practice, practice. Next week, we're going to introduce chords for week 5, and then I believe week 6 might end up being our last week. We'll try to actually introduce some chorded songs, okay? Next week is literally just going to be me breaking down chords for you and how to play each one, okay? It's going to be a repetitive one. We're going to go through each chord of the major groupings that you might play, and we'll go from there, okay? So thank you very much. Practice hard, stay safe, and we'll see you in a couple more weeks, okay? Bye.